if I know I'm planning a long run on Saturday morning or whatever, I've put a post in that says, "Give me a call. Here's my phone number. If you're out running, we can run together for a mile or so.
Wow.
If you're not, keep me company for a mile or so, like whatever." And I've gotten a bunch of text messages from that, and a few people that have called. You build a community. Like, I'm comfortable enough doing that. Like, nobody has randomly called me other times.
Podcast Junkies episode 169. Welcome back, one and all, and welcome to the new listeners as well. I've been having some great conversations with folks who are just finding out about the podcast. A lot of them from Dave Jackson and the interview that he had with me on the School of Podcasting. The latest episode is out now, so check that out. He, quote unquote, cracks the code on my interview style, and that was a lot of fun to hear how he was analyzing how it is that I have these amazing conversations with guests and had some interesting takeaways. And it's always fun to hear someone talk about you and have a conversation, because we did have a conversation as well, and then he had a post-mortem follow-up about our conversation. So it's all in all really interesting. Dave is really a pro at what he does. That's why he's been doing this for so long. He is literally a podcasting veteran, and he knows his stuff. So it was really an honor to finally make it on that show, having listened to that show when I first got started podcasting. Last week, we had a great conversation with Erica Mandy, host of The Newsworthy. A lot of good buzz on that as well. And Erica is just really a bundle of joy, and she really takes her job seriously with what she's doing. All that journalism experience really pays off. And so that was a really fun journey to hear how she got to where she is with the show and why it's doing so well. And it's not surprising once you hear the interview. It's really good. Episode 168. This episode is a reunion of sorts. We welcome back Denny Krahe. Now, Denny was a guest on the show, checking here now, back in 2015. He was guest number 32, episode number 32, released on February 17th. And it's really interesting because we've been friends for such a long time and been started around the same time with podcasting. And he's got a new book coming out, and we wanted to talk about that and just have a moment to catch up. And sometimes when we have a podcast, we think that we're going to be able to maintain these relationships over an extended period of time and continue to circle back with friends. But when that doesn't happen, it's nice to have a podcast as a vehicle to have a nice face-to-face conversation with a friend of the show and a supporter of the show for the longest time. So it's great to catch up. We talk about the first time we had him on the show and seeing the progress of his work throughout the years. We go back and we talk about what was going on in his mind when he decided to start the show and how he's been able to build a client base through his podcast. We discuss the idea of it taking time to see the results of your podcasting work, and we're both a testament to that, and how he's grown as an interviewer over the past 3 years. And we touched on a couple of his memorable guests or episodes. So this, all in all, it's a really nice chat with a good friend of the show, Denny Krahe. I touched upon this last week, but I'm starting a case study program, and I'm looking for a few specific people. It's really a small group of folks that I'm going to work on a podcast with. So really, if you're serious and ready to launch your podcast, if you're running a profitable business, if you have time to work on your show starting this month, and you have at least 300 people, give or take, on your email list, you are friendly and you are coachable and you can keep a secret. Then reply to me via email, Harry@Podcast Junkies. All you need to do is place the words case study in the subject line or in the body, and I'll be in touch soon. So really looking forward. We just had a wave of folks go through recently, and they've had a lot of results, good results with the launch of their show, and I'm just looking forward to help the next round. Stay tuned to the end when we reveal this week's retention hashtag. And for those who don't know, it's a nice Easter egg at the end of an episode to see who's been paying attention. Shout out to all the folks who participate on Twitter every single time an episode goes live. But for now, enjoy my conversation with superfan Denny. My good friend, Denny Krahe, thank you so much for a return trip back on Podcast Junkies.
Oh, man, Harry, it's certainly a pleasure, and I'm in rarefied air now with the return trip. There's only been a couple, if memory serves. I've been listening for long enough that I feel like I only heard the same voice a few times.
It was funny because I remember when I asked you to come on the show, you're like, well, I just started my show. I don't know if what we'd have to talk about, but it's in line with what I've continued to do week over week when I don't miss weeks, week over week. And just I'm scratching my own itch in terms of curiosity about the podcasting world. And sometimes it's a 10-year veteran, and sometimes it's someone who's literally had 6 or 7 episodes. So I think that conversation, because we were friends back then, fell in line. And I was just getting started as well. So I wasn't on some high pedestal about like having restrictions about who would be on the show at that point.
Yeah, and that's of what you're doing. That's the beauty of it, is that you can go all kinds of different directions, and it all makes for good podcasting, or a good conversation, as long as the person you're talking to can have a conversation. I guess that's the one requirement. Yeah,
we always have an origin story, and yours and mine goes way back, because I had to look up the episode as we were getting started, and you came on in February of 2015, which is 3 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And it's crazy, because I was just thinking about celebrating my 4th year anniversary in April, but that means there's conversations that I had that were like, yours was 32, and that was 3 years. So I'm pushing. I'm going to be saying to people, "Oh, I spoke to you 4 years ago,"
mm-hmm.
And it's just wild. And because we started around the same time, so it's hard to look at progress. And you can relate to this probably from running as well. It's hard to relate to progress when you're looking back over days and weeks, but sometimes you need that window of the months and the years to really see how far you've come. I'm wondering if you feel the same way.
Oh yeah. I mean, it relates to so many different things, running, of course, and any type of professional endeavor, any project you're working on, where it just feels like the day to day, like you're not making much progress, or like where I was last week, last month, last quarter, last year. It's like, God, have I grown at all? But then when you take just a step back to look at actually where you were, as anybody who's had a podcast for years knows, if you go back and listen to something you did a couple of years ago, like, probably, you hope at least, that you've gotten a little bit better. Like maybe you're a little bit better as a host, as a producer, whatever it is that you're doing. But then you go back and listen, and you're like, well, God, like, was I really that bad then? And then if you've been around, like us, 3 years, 4 years, you can go back way back and go, God, like, I can't believe I even put that out. But it's just part of the process of, you've got to start, and you've got to build upon it. And as long as you can be fairly consistent and keep working, you're if you're trying to get better, you're probably going to be able to keep getting better. And that's definitely something I've experienced in with my show. It's like I'll tell people jokingly, but not really always jokingly, like, yeah, just don't go back and listen to the first 150 episodes, because they're not good. Like not that the guest wasn't any good, but I wasn't any good. And that, and you just continue to try to get better. And now I'm looking back at, the first, I'm at 500 and something, 540, wow. 550, something like that. And it's like, I go back and look at episode 250, 300, where I thought I was getting decent. And even now I'm like, God, like I still wasn't, but you just continue to evolve and hopefully grow.
There must be tons of analogies, and I'm sure you use them with your clients and with folks that have been working with you about it's essentially putting in the miles/hours, mm-hmm. use the appropriate metaphor. And have you found that to be the case as you start to work with people?
Yeah, definitely. It's all a process, and like everybody does, and it's in every, at least I think it's probably in every industry, every endeavor. You look at the people who have quote unquote made it, who are where you're trying to be, and you start to compare and go, oh God, like I'm not making it, I'm not making the progress, I'll never get to that level, like whatever path that they're on, whatever pedestal you've put them on. And that attitude doesn't help you. It's got to be about doing that work. It's got to be about going for the little runs. It's got to be about publishing an episode when your schedule says you're going to do it, or when you've committed to do it. It's posting the video to YouTube or interacting on social media. It's every little step matters. And you have the choice every day to do something, to take that next step, to move yourself incrementally forward that maybe doesn't feel like much, maybe in the short term isn't much, but you pile that up episode after episode, tweet after tweet, message after message, and pretty soon you're looking back to February of 2015 going, holy shit, like we've come along, both of us, we've come a long way since then. Like can't believe it's been so long, but can't believe it hasn't, it's only been 3 years. It's crazy how that works.
So shout out to Chris Cerrone, who is our connector. I think if I remember correctly, it was, where was the first place we actually met face to face? Was it at a Podcast Movement?
Yeah. That was the original,
The first one. Yeah.
the first one in Dallas. Yeah, that was our first handshake and hug was at that event.
So shout out to Chris Cerrone and Lacey Shirley, who connected us and still remain friends with them to this day. So it's been interesting, the journey for both of us, as you mentioned. And I want to just kind of like use that opportunity, because a lot of times we don't get to just tease this out. Like the 3 years is a long time. So take listeners back to your thoughts about, what was going through your mind when you decided you wanted to start the show. What were you thinking, in terms of like your format and who you were planning to, thinking of talking to at that point in time, and try to put yourself in the shoes of the person you were, 3+ years ago.
Yeah. So when I started the show, I had another podcast going at the time, and I thought it was like a solo show, kind of a health and fitness thing. And I was doing, I think, 2 episodes a week, and I enjoyed it, but it was kind of one of those things where I was starting to almost run out of things to talk about, which sounds ridiculous, but I mean, when you're in, kind of creating the script a couple times a week, every week, like it was a lot, and I was enjoying it, but I was really starting to get into running pretty seriously at that point. And I was just like, I would love to do an interview show, because that's got to be easy. Like, just talk to people and no big deal. Have a quick hour conversation or 45-minute conversation, and that's it. And just post it up. And as everybody who has an interview show knows, that's not quite how the process works. It's every bit as involved, takes every bit as long to do front to back of contacting guests and recording and lining up schedules and editing and uploading and all that stuff. It still takes forever. And so I had both shows going for about a month, and that was right about the same time that Podcast Movement was, and right about the same time that our daughter was born. So I became a father, started a second show, had all this stuff going on, and pretty quickly decided that I was going to, can the other show, stick with the running show and build that. And the plan, I mean, I'll be honest. Why not be honest, right? Like, the plan was to have a couple of big name guests right away, blow up, reach the top of the charts, millions of downloads, sponsor city, like be another podcast millionaire, in what, 2 months, 3 months, whatever, not very long. And obviously that didn't quite happen. That's not exactly
that's not how it works.
That's not exactly how it works. Yeah, there's a bit more to making a business that supports you out of your pod. It's doable, but it's not the dream that sometimes you get sold or that is fabricated to make it sound like that's the reality. It can happen, but it's as I've started to learn, every overnight success is 7 years, 6 years. Pick your number of years, but it's in the making. It takes a while to do that. So back then, like I was bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and thought that this was going to be the thing, and now it's starting to actually be the thing. Like it pretty much is. The thing that I'm doing for business, thing I'm doing professionally is pod, and then everything that comes off of the podcast, which is the other thing they don't tell you. It's the podcast is this little sliver. Maybe it's the marketing arm, but there's a lot more that ends up going into creating a business out of it. So yeah, I mean, I was just so, I don't want to say naive, but I was just so expected that everything was going to fall into place, and it wasn't quite the case. But that's probably a good thing, because I certainly appreciate it now a lot more, and appreciate the effort, and start to, and I also still appreciate the newcomers, because it's still growing. There's still new people that think that as soon as they launch their podcast, it's going to blow up, and I hope it does for them. But it's also kind of get that old man syndrome where you're like, oh yeah, I remember having those thoughts. We'll see. Hopefully I'll see you in a couple of years while you're still doing it, but we'll see, because all of the stats about pod fading and all that good stuff.
Well, it's interesting because I love the fact that you have that perspective, because as newcomers enter podcasting, I think it's important to set expectations. And I tell people, and I've heard people tell people outright, if you're starting a podcast to monetize it directly, good luck. It's not going to happen. I mean, I'm quite honest with people. I'm like, if that's your only strategy to try to get the downloads and to try to get the sponsors, I mean, I just work out rough math for them. I said, okay, let's say you get 20,000 downloads, which any podcaster would be, ecstatic about. With the CPM, which is cost per thousand, of roughly $20 by the time the sponsor gets paid, we're talking about $200 per episode. So maybe you do 4, that's $800. I don't think anyone's going to be building a business making $800 a month off their podcast. So just think about it quickly, and that's what we just think about it like strategically. And that's what we do with clients. We just direct them to the call to action so that they can get build a following and build clients, which it seems like you started to do off your show.
Yeah, certainly. And that was something that I kind of maybe thought I knew I should be doing. But then when going to Podcast Movement, the first one really kind of hammered it home that yes, having the podcast and whatever little money you can make from sponsors or from whatever affiliates and things like that, which I mean, it's like you said, it's not maybe money that's going to make you rich, but it's kind of nice to get a check here and there. Money shows up from Amazon every month from affiliate links that you've mentioned and put in the show notes and things like that. And you're like, wow, like it might only be $100, it might only be $70, whatever, but it's something. But yeah, using the podcast as a marketing tool and using that to, have various calls to action, join, get this guide, get this thing free, get on the mailing list, and treat that as a business, and you're communicating regularly with your subscribers and trying to nurture those relationships, build, I almost hate to say it, but it's so true. Building that know, like, and trust thing, it just rubs me the wrong way, even though it's so true. And you just build those relationships and then when people are, they may not be ready to buy now, when you kind of want them to buy, when you kind of need something to help with the bottom line. But when they are ready, if they know you, they've been listening to you 3 times a week or once a week or whatever your podcast is for a year or 2 years or whatever, they don't go looking elsewhere. They know what you offer, they know what your services are, and it makes it almost a slam dunk.
It's so interesting that you say that, because I was listening to, I think it's called the Productize podcast. I was looking it up on Overcast here. And it's really interesting because he was interviewing Steve D'Souza, who has got a couple of marketing books that I probably should be reading, because the way he was describing it and the way he was talking, I'm like, whoa, this guy knows exactly what he's talking about. It's the Productize podcast. And he said you should construct your marketing in a way that you're getting people to buy after the 3rd contact with them, something along those lines. Wow. But in a way, if you thought that you wanted someone to buy at the 3rd touch point, you would think differently about what your first one was and about what your second one was, so that you're not like, hand extended out the first time you meet someone. Hey, my name is Harry. Can you buy my shit?
Right.
Which so many people do. And I think I've learned to slow down that process. And it is the know, like, and trust. And a friend of mine, Katie Kremitzos, I think you know Katie as well. She had Dana Malstaff on her show, and she was talking about know, love, and trust. So takes it even like that, even deeper level, which resonated with me a lot. But I think it's really important. And I think, I keep using the metaphors that are so apropos in fitness and running, but just it's more about the journey and really deciding if you want, are you in this for the long term, I think is really what it comes down to.
Yeah. There's unless you're coming into it with some name recognition, like Tim Ferriss launched his show, whatever it was, a couple of years ago, and like it was immediately monetized for whatever with thousands of downloads. But that's because
millions,
that's because who he was, and
exactly.
most people aren't going to start their podcast at that level, and you could get to that level, but it's going to take some time. It's going to take some work. You're definitely going to have to be in it, like you said, for the long haul. There's no there's no shortcuts. And we all try. We all look for the hacks or ways to systematize something or automate something, and those things help a little bit. But there's no substitute for showing up, press and record, scheduling your interviews or doing your solo shows, whatever it is, scripting your narrative podcast, whatever it is. You just have to show up and keep doing it. And if it's just for fun and it's a passion project, great. Enjoy it. Enjoy the process. If you're looking to build something out of it, make a business, make a livelihood out of it, great. Show up, do the work, and trust that you'll get there, but it's probably not going to be as quickly as you think. Even if you're trying to be realistic and saying, oh, it'll take a year or 2, like it might, but it also might take 4, 5, 6 years, just because you just never know. And you just got to keep being consistent.
It's interesting because we are at a unique time, and what's happening with podcasts moving into the public view I know Rob Walsh hates to say that we're going through a renaissance. He's like, how many renaissances are we going through? But this one, I think, I mean, only having experienced 4 years of it myself, it seems different because of like things like the startup podcast going to TV and Lore, being a TV show, and like these shows are getting a lot of visibility, and I'm hearing more and more discussions with people who are like actively trying to pitch podcasts to the people who normally would review TV pilots. And so it's interesting because I mean, your show, I could totally see being on TV, like my show, I would love to have it on TV. And I think we got in at a good time because it's like we have the track record, and I think there's just some tweaking that would be involved. But I think there's going to be more and more when all these services pop up for podcasters. I got a feeling there's going to be someone actively being the service that pitches studios on podcasts, because those roles exist in like Gimlet and stuff like that. But I think someone's going to come out of one of those shops and say, you know what, I'm just going to work with podcasters.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? Like I mean, yeah. I'm not as ear to the ground about all the cutting edge podcast stuff as you are, since my show, my niche is much more running related, and yeah. We're still, our community is certainly coming around to it, but we're behind the curve when it comes to the latest and greatest in the podcasting, which is good for me now because I am more established and that helps. But obviously, there's also a lot more shows coming in. But yeah, I mean, who knows? Who like the future is certainly. I'm excited for it. Like who would have thought? I mean, I don't know. Maybe you would have thought. Maybe we would have dreamed about it. But 4 years ago, 5 years ago, like just where it is now, with it being so as mainstream it is. But then on the flip side of that, you also have to take into account that we're kind of in the bubble. So it seems more. I don't want to say more popular, but it seems more popular than maybe it is, because I don't know about you, but I still run into people all the time that it's like, what do you do? And I'm like, I host a podcast, and they're like, what? And you got to go back to it's on-demand radio or whatever whatever you want to, however you want to analogize it. But there's still so many people that don't know. So I think we might still be at a renaissance, but there still could be a few more. Sorry, Rob, but there still could be a few more coming, because as more and more people get exposed to it, and we've all heard of the apps that'll be in the phone or in the cars eventually, and things like that'll make it even more mainstream, more easily accessible. I definitely am still bullish on it and think it's going to continue to grow, and can't wait to see how things change. And yeah, if anybody wants me to have some type of show with interviewing runners and stuff, like let's saddle up. I'm down for that.
Let's put that. I always like put intentions out to the universe on the show. So let's talk a little bit about your 3-year journey, because there's got to be a lot of lessons learned. And so one of the first things I want to know is, how have you grown as an interviewer over the past 3 years?
Oh gosh. I mean, I was probably like a lot of people in the early stages of having, my list of questions of whatever it was going to be, 10 questions, 12 questions. And you'd ask the first, and I mean, we've heard this story on anybody who's been podcasting for a while, and had, I asked the question, and before they could almost finish the answer, I'd be asking the second question, and having no worry about, what was said or following up or things like that. It's all about me. Yeah. It's all about, I did all this work to check. I did all the background. I know all your little secrets. Let me talk about them all.
Let me show off. Yeah.
Right. And now, I mean, I recorded an episode yesterday where I think I had 3 bullet points for talking points, and that was it. I've certainly become a much better listener. At least I hope I've become a better listener and able to listen to what they're saying, and, try to, a lot of times I'll ask a question, I have the first question the opening question is the only scripted question I have. And it's the same, for some reason, it was the same question I asked in episode 1 too. So nice. I've legitimately stuck with it the whole way through, but it's just, what is your favorite distance to race and why? And it just, there's so many different distances, from 5Ks to marathons to, 100-mile races, that I've had all of the answers at various points, but there's almost always, I better not say always, because there'll be that one time that it wasn't the case, but almost always in that answer, there's like 5 things that I would love to follow up on. And it's like, I've learned to not try to follow up on all 5, but pick one and follow that trail and see where it takes us. And sometimes it'll bring us back to one of the other things I wanted to follow up on. And sometimes it'll take me to 3 or 4 other places, and I'll pick one of those things, but just listening to the guest, listening to the person you're having a conversation with, hopefully making them feel more comfortable Again, at the beginning, I don't know that I was comfortable at the beginning, so I don't know how I could make the guest feel comfortable.
Yeah.
But now, really, especially, you could, a lot of us will have a little bit of a chat before we start the official recording, and just kind of asking questions and things like that, and you can kind of tell if they're ready to go, if they're a little bit nervous, whatever, and just really like, hey, I've done this a few times, like, you just I'm not out to ask any get you questions. Like, take your time, and we'll talk. It's just a conversation. It's me and you, and just really try to be better at conversing, whatever I'm trying to say, having a conversation. But really make it feel as natural as possible. And I like to think that I was that way from the beginning, but like I said earlier, you go back and listen to the first 150 episodes. I wasn't that way, and I've certainly learned and gotten better over time at really trying to make the guest as comfortable as possible, and really listening to what they're saying, which helps them to want to tell a good story because they know you're listening and that you're going to, well, wait a second, like, what was that little bit? Like, let's go back to that little bit and flesh that out a little bit more. And it just makes, I think it makes for a better podcasting. It makes for a better conversation. That's ultimately the goal.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I found that it colors for me the way I have real world conversations as well, because I almost like, those skills come in handy, being a listener, being comfortable with silence. I know a lot of times we get nervous as podcast hosts asking the questions and then not getting the immediate answer and then just rushing to the next one. But one of those things I've learned to do, and that's why the video for me comes in handy, because I can see when someone is actually thinking through an answer as opposed to like, are you still there? And so I've used, I think, video for probably, 160 of the 162, just because it just makes more sense for me. And shout out to the folks at Squadcast who are testing out their new platform today. So hopefully everything goes well as I think it should. So it's exciting, all these new technologies coming on board to make to almost like let the technology get out of the way, because you probably see it more. I have the luxury of speaking to podcasters who have nice mics 9 times out of 10, and so I started off on the right foot, and I didn't go through a lot of what my peers went through, because you're talking to people who are screaming into their laptop, maybe. I don't know. So, has that been a bit of a challenge for you, just getting people acclimated to the tech?
Yeah. And certainly some folks are more tech savvy and have more experience or more just have a microphone or whatever on hand. And so that has definitely been a bit of a, there's times that's a little bit of a struggle. There's times that, we've had to kind of either press pause because there's something crazy going on in the background, and it's I don't try to make it perfect. I'm not worried about having a little bit of noise, but like when it's almost like you can't hear the person, it's like, all right, we've got to pause this for a second while the lawnmower goes by or whatever it is. So there's definitely some of that there, and there's definitely been cases of somebody's got maybe it's their laptop, maybe it's their phone, whatever it is, hooked up to Skype and they're talking on it, but they don't realize that like they set the coffee cup down on the table, and it sounds like you set it right on top of the microphone, and it's just like I don't get too bent out of shape about that. I don't, as long as it's not overwhelming, as long as it's not just totally distracting. But yeah, for me, that's been something that has been something that I just had to let go of and not worry about making it absolutely the most pristine quality. Obviously, quality still is important, and we try to do the best we can. But I'm talking to people that a lot of times, maybe not a lot of times, but more often, whatever I'm trying to say, it's not uncommon for it to be somebody's first time using Skype and first time doing a podcast. Certainly, first time doing a podcast interview, and they have no idea what they're getting into. And so I'm not asking them to buy a microphone, or I mean, if they want to, great. I think I have that on my automated reminder thing or whatever. And the information when you sign up is if you want to get a microphone, that's great. But if not, as long as we're in a quiet room. Please have some headphones. They can be, I still just use the Apple headphones. Like I'm not fancy with that. Like it's just enough to make sure there's no feedback from whatever speakers you have into your microphones. There's no echo, and we're good. If it's a quiet room and you got some iPhone or whatever phone headphones, we're good. And so I try to keep the barrier to entry as low as possible. But yeah, some of these opportunities and just from playing with Squadcast now, just in the last 25 minutes. This is kind of nice, and certainly is one less thing to have to worry about when it comes to reaching out to people about. Well, I don't know about the technology. Hey, as long as you got a browser, as long as you've got Chrome running, just show up, and we're good.
And a decent internet connection, which Uh, so with 500 plus episodes in the can, there's got to be some memorable ones. And I'm wondering if there's people that you wouldn't have even imagined having on your show when you first started, who you've had a chance to talk to.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, there's certainly, there's, probably, and I hate to say this, but there's probably more memorable episodes that I've forgotten than that I can just remember off the top of my head. But there's been some good ones. There's been times, and what I love doing now, and again, this goes back to the question earlier about being more comfortable and not worrying about scripting everything out. Like I script the intro still, just so I can make sure I hit any big highlights and things like that. But once we start the conversation, it's all organic. And there's so many times that somebody will say something. Wait a second, like I had no idea that you did X, Y, and Z, or that that this happened. So like it takes it way off track of where I expected it to go. And so those episodes are always something that I really, really enjoy, just because, like I get the idea, and I've heard this on lots of episodes about interviewing, of knowing your guest as well as possible, so that you kind of know where. But I like being surprised. I like having a little bit of background and having some ideas, so that if the conversation gets to one of those spots where it stalls a little bit, like, all right, well, let's shift gears and talk about this thing, and then see how it takes off. But I love when things just come out of nowhere, and I'm like, wait a minute, you ran Boston the year of the bombing? Like, what was that like? Or you ran Boston the year after the bombing? Like, how was that? Or you ran Boston 20 years ago, and now you went back and ran it 2 years ago, which 20 years ago Boston was still an impressive marathon, but it wasn't on TV. It wasn't the hype that it is now in the running community, at least. So like, let's compare 20 years ago to your experience now. Or you've been running for 40 years, like wow. What was running like in the 70s? Like I have no idea. I wasn't even alive in the 70s. What was the running community like back then?
Yeah.
And sometimes you kind of know that they've maybe been running for a while, but you have no idea that, oh yeah, I ran my first marathon in 1972, and then I didn't run again until 2015. Well, all right, well, hold on. Like, what?
A lot has changed since then.
Yeah, let's dive into that. So I love those types of things. And then as for the people that I've really wanted to have to interview and have I been able to, when I started the show, and I can't remember, I'd have to look at the dates, but I think we might have had one of them when we did the first episode. But I had two Peters that I wanted to interview when I started. One was Peter Segel, who hosts the NPR Wait, Don't Tell Me show.
Okay.
And he's a pretty well-known runner. He's like a 3:30 marathoner or so, which is still a bit faster than me. So he's good at running. And then Peter Shankman, who's an entrepreneur, business owner, and also a triathlete runner, whatever. And it was a while back. It was, like I said, maybe around the same time that we chatted 3 years ago, that I did have a chance to interview Peter Shankman. Peter Segel still isn't returning my calls, but we're still knocking on the door. We're episode 500 now. Episode 550 now. Like come on, and whenever you're ready, whenever it works out, we'll be happy to have you.
Have you taken a look at the LinkedIn connections? Maybe you're only one connection away from.
I should, and I know it, because he's written. I don't know if he writes regularly, but he's written columns for Runner's World before, and I've had a lot of folks that have connections at Runner's World, so I'm probably not as far away from him as possible, as I think. But I've done, like, for people that listen to Wait, like, they do a limerick section on every episode, kind of like a current event news type of thing that has a limerick to it. So I've tweeted limericks to him before. Tried to tweet things that would hopefully be funny enough, or something that would catch his attention. And just
I think what you should do is, and this is a nice segue because I want to talk about your community, but I think if you sort of put something out within your community and say, hey, I'm trying to reach Peter, let's all tweet at him one day and say, hey, it's time for you to be on Diz Runs, and he got tagged like in 20, 30, 40, 50 tweets. He'd be like, whoa, who's this Diz Runs, and why does he have such a big community, and why are they champions of him? That might be something you can try. I think that'd be pretty cool.
Yeah,
I'll jump on there as well. Let me know, and I'll put some weight behind that.
Yeah, that would be that might be the way to do it. Just make a big enough splash that it can't continue to, even if it's just like, dude, no thanks, I don't do podcast interviews. At least then you have an answer and you can move on. But
okay, I'll try back in a year.
Yeah, exactly. I'm clearly not going anywhere. So
let's talk about the community, because over the time, not just the listeners, the people that have begun to start working with you as well. Can you talk a little bit about the genesis and the growth of that?
Yeah, I mean it's great, and as I can remember the days of putting episodes out and wondering. I mean, you kind of know that people are listening because you can see the numbers on Libsyn or whatever you use to track your data. But it's like you begging, hey, anybody, you want to shoot me a tweet, shoot me an email, say hello, send a smoke signal, like whatever your best communication is. Please let me know you're listening. And I still do that, and I still don't get much feedback from the episodes per se. But yeah, starting a Facebook group, which has been going for a few years, I guess. But really, like in the last year and a half, I've really made that a priority of just interacting every day, posting stuff up, making sure to obviously comment and likes and anything that other people are sharing, making sure that it doesn't go unnoticed, and really kind of have built it into a pretty good community. It's cool, like, to the point where I've done this a few times and I've had a few people take me up on it, although not as many as I had hoped. But if I know I'm planning a long run on Saturday morning or whatever, I've put a post in that says, "Give me a call. Here's my phone number. If you're out running, we can run together for a mile or so. Wow. If you're not, keep me company for a mile or so, like whatever." And I've gotten a bunch of text messages from that, and a few people that have called. You build a community. Like, I'm comfortable enough doing that. Like, nobody has randomly called me other times. It's just like like they just know, like, all right, here's he's out this morning. I'll tell him about what time I'll probably be done at 9:00 Eastern time. So do the math on your time zone. And if it's before then, give me a call. If I don't answer, that means I'm talking to somebody else. Yeah. So call back in 10 minutes and I'll answer then. And if not, no worries. And so, it's having that community, having a group that is open to that. Like, I do a live stream every week. So there's, just interaction there. And I even encourage them to troll me while I'm doing the live stream, so that they're cracking jokes and I'm responding, and we're hanging out and shooting the breeze. And usually do like a top like a five. It's Friday 5, so it's kind of a top 5, this, that, or the other. Sometimes it's running related. Sometimes it's favorite movies, favorite episodes of Seinfeld. I mean, whatever, just something fun. Usually kind of a low key thing to do, but just to build that up. And the more that I've poured into it, the more that I've dedicated some time and effort to it, then the more that the group starts to interact with each other. And it's that weird dichotomy of the more I do, the less I have to do, but I don't want to pull back because I don't want to lose that momentum. So, exactly. I keep doing it, but it's really has, taken on, and like any group, there's a handful of people that you can pretty much rely on. They're going to post at least once a week, probably. And there's a handful that are going to reply to everybody's everything. And then there's a bunch that just lurk, and that's cool too. But yeah, it's been great. And just, the relationships, I had people that came down to run the Disney marathon. And so it's like, all right, I'll go spectate. Like, I'm not running, but it's close enough. I'll just drive over there in the morning and watch, and they run by and say hi, and just to add that extra connection point and deepen that relationship. But it's a lot of fun. Like, I don't care that much for Facebook, but God, I love that Facebook group. Like that's what I check Facebook for. And if there's nothing going on in the group, or after I've replied to everybody in the group, I'm like, I'm off. Like, I don't scroll through my news feed. I don't really care that much, but let me check out my group and see how my people are doing.
That's some discipline, because it's a bit of a rabbit hole. And I know that they've created tools that blocks the feed while you're in there. And I'm just like you. I'm using it a lot for business. I've got the mastermind that I'm a part of. I've got my own group. But I think you've dropped your phone number into the actual group, your actual phone number into the group. Mm-hmm. That says a lot to the community and the level of trust you have with the people in there.
Yeah, and like I said, nobody's. I guess there's always that room for a bad apple to crop up at some point, but. I'll get 3 or 4 text messages, and I have no idea who they're from, because like they don't necessarily say who they are, and more often than not, like I know their Facebook avatar, and that's it. But they're just like, hey, hope you had a great run this morning. Like, I've got 6 miles on my calendar today, and it's like, all right, cool. Like, then I'll text back, hope your run was great too, and then that's it. Like, there's no continual back and forth, but it's just give me a call today. I'm out and just cruising, and I'm not in any rush, not in any hurry. So I'll be able to talk and while I'm still running. And if you want a free coaching call this morning, like you got to get up early, because I'm going to be out there, early too. Yeah. But I'm talking to runners, so most of them aren't familiar with the idea of sleeping in. It's get your run in before the rest of life goes on. Yeah. But yeah, it's like I said, I've had, I think I've done it 3 times. I think one time nobody called, but then 2 times I had one person call one time, and a couple people called the other time. So I've had, and what a way to connect and like somebody like, hey, I'm so-and-so from the Facebook group. I'm like, oh, hey, how you doing? Like, what are you up to this? And we talk for 15, 20 minutes and
so cool.
All right, well, I'll let you get back to your run. All right, I'll let you get back to your run. And it just, it's a really cool, and I don't know where I thought of that idea, but I was just like, you know what? Why not?
It's so smart because it's something that just works in well with what you are, what the brand is. I mean, it's the running, there's so many different ways the listener can I'm speaking to the listener directly now. Like, you need to think about what Denny just said and just say, how can I apply this to my show? I'm a big fan of Facebook groups. I'm running the one that's Podcast Junkies, which is for the show, and then Podcasting for Thought Leaders, which is for the business side. What's the name of your group in case anyone wants to join?
It's the Diz Runs Tribe. If you just search Diz Runs, it's the group. So the other thing you've been working on is a book, from what I understand, and the look on your face is the emphasis on works on. So let's talk a little bit about that now. Yeah. So I started this book writing project in November of 2016, and here we are, recording this in March of 2018, and I had anticipated being finished with the book spring-ish of 2017. So April, May, something like that was when I was finished writing it in February, March of last year. So I was stupid. I didn't know any better, and I was working with somebody who was kind of helping me with the process, but it wasn't like direct coaching. It was like, all right, once you get to this point, let me know, and we'll get you to the next part or whatever. And so I was like, all right, well, I'm done writing this thing. It's getting to be edited and all that good stuff. So, what should that take? 6 weeks, maybe 8 weeks, something like that. And it should be good to go. And it probably could have been good to go at that point if I would have known all the other things that needed to be done. So I started, putting out in the emails and in the group and in the advertising myself on the podcast, like, hey, the book is coming. Here's what the book is. I read the first chapter, and was all taking pre-orders for the book and blah 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 blah. And then then it was like, oh, I need to still do this and I need to do that. And the person who was going to do the cover for me was having some issues, and it was a friend, so I couldn't necessarily just fire her, but I was trying to give her the outs of hey, if this is too much on your plate right now. She's a designer, so it's not like it was outside of her wheelhouse, but I was if this is too much for you, just let me know. I've got other contacts. I can if you know somebody, give me a recommendation. I'll use them. So that drug on longer than it should have before I was just like, all right, I'm I have to do something else. And so it's just all these little things that kept kicking the can down the road. And then, I'm trying to do as I didn't want to cut any corners. I wanted to do it right. But at the same time, I don't just have money to just throw out to I got to do a lot of it myself too. Yeah. So, while maintaining the podcast, while still coaching, while doing this, while doing that,
while running.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. So long story. But finally, have gotten to the point where it's done. It's finished. I wish I was one of those podcasters that had the mix board of sound effects, because I would feel like I need a trumpet. Yeah, it's like I said, it's taken longer than it should have, but it's certainly been a learning experience. Certainly been a good experience, and something that it's not like I'm going to be. I already have a couple of plans of a couple of other books that can and will be written, but it certainly learned don't start promoting it until till the ink on the printed copy is pretty much dry. Exactly. Wait until it's really ready, but before you start. Because and for the most part, and I'll thank everybody who's pre-ordered. I think I sold 60 copies or so, but I realized in fairly short order, that was about 3 weeks worth of promoting it, that I need to stop pushing this because it's not ready to be done yet. And it's not going to be, I was, at that point I'm had already promised it was going to be out in about 2 more weeks. And I was like, yeah, that's not going to happen. So I stopped really pushing it. But of those 60 people or so, plus or minus that ordered it, I think I've had 1 or 2 people that were like, yeah, this is waited too long. I want my refund. And so, you refund them, whatever. Okay. But almost everybody, and I've tried to keep them updated, hey, I apologize and whatnot. I sent the digital draft out a while back. Here's the digital, because it's a book about how to create your own training plan for a race. So people bought it in theory thinking that, hey, I'm gonna run this race in 6 months or 8 months or whatever. So I'm gonna get this book to help me train for it. And I didn't have a book to give them. So here's the manuscript. Here's everything that's, there's still some edits that need to be made, but it's gonna be, insert comma, delete semicolon, that type of thing. So the content is there, and try to keep them happy that way. But I'm just, as we're recording this, it's about 9 days before the official button gets pushed on Amazon, and I can't wait to get it in people's hands and hear what they think, and just be able to officially say that the book is finished, and the promotion continues, and the work on selling it continues, but just to cross that, it's been hanging over my head for at least a year, if you want to go back to when I started it, 16 months or 17 months. It's just like, to just finally get that off my shoulders is going to be.
Well, congratulations. I mean, that's a super huge milestone, especially for entrepreneurs, and knowing a lot of people that we know in this business, and a lot of people put out books, and I don't think anyone understands like how much work it is, regardless of how big the book is or how long it is. I think the fact that you get it out the door, mine is about still halfway done. Mm-hmm. I mean, I overthink it because I'm a bit of a control freak. So I'm like OCD, and I think it'll never be perfect. And I think that's what, to your point, what you were alluding to. But the good thing is, by the time this episode goes live, it'll definitely be in the Amazon store. So what's the names they should search for so they can get their copy?
It is Be Ready on Race Day. It's all about preparing for a race. And if you want to know a little bit more about it, the link is bereadyoonraceday.com. You can get the sample chapters and all that kind of good stuff. But it'll be on Amazon, and one click it, baby. Put that in the cart and let's rock and roll.
We'll definitely have that in the show notes. And if you are listening to this and you downloaded it and you get the book, let me know so we can let Denny know that I think when it comes to these things, like it is with our first podcast, we want to know like if one person is listening, and with the book, we want to learn. I'm sure you're voraciously going to be looking at those Amazon reviews and just anything that's any indication that people are consuming it and what their feedback is. Because with all this content we put out there as creators, at the end of the day, we need, I don't know if it's validation, but we need to know that it's resonating with someone, and I think that's really important for us.
Yeah, and it's certainly a blessing and a curse scenario. Like I've gotten pretty good at most checking my stats once a day, and even then I probably only check them every couple. Like I check them when I upload my next episode. So whenever whenever I'm uploading an episode, like that's when I'll check and see how things are going. Yeah. But yeah, I think there's a bit of validation, and also it's just like, if I'm going to keep doing this work, like I think I know I've said, and I'm sure I'm not the first person that said, I'd keep doing the show even if nobody was listening, and I like to think that I would. Yeah. But damn, it sure feels good to know that people are listening. It sure helps on the days that maybe you're not feeling it, that you don't want to put your podcasting voice on to record a solo show or to do an interview or whatever. Even though I love those things, and I feel good after I'm done with an interview. But there's times going into it that I'm like, God, please just. Could they maybe cancel today? Like, could I get an email saying, sorry, I have to reschedule? Like that would just be amazing. And then, didn't get that email. So I guess I better do my quick prep work and be ready to go. And then, all right, better turn it on, like better game face on, like time to turn it on. And so yeah, knowing that people are listening, knowing that, if you miss an episode, which I don't think, I think maybe I actually did maybe miss a day on the normal routine a few months back, which has almost never happened. Like I usually at least put something out or throw a best of out or something like that. But I think I might've missed a day, and you get a couple like, hey, no podcast today. Like what's everything okay?
So I love that.
People are listening. People do care. People do notice. Yeah. And that certainly helps to keep you wanting to keep, like, not that I don't want to keep going, but it just, on those days when it's a struggle, it's like, all right, I'm in it for the long haul. I need to take that next step today to keep moving, so that 2 years from now I can look back at 2018 and be like, God, I was bad in 2018, but like look at how good I am now in 2020.
Well, it's so interesting because now I'm like a bit self-conscious, because you are, one of my oldest podcasting friends, and you've listened to the show, for I imagine quite some time, and I won't put you on a spot and ask you if you listen to every single episode, but I know that you've commented enough to know that you're still listening. So I'm just curious, like, what have you seen any change in me, in my delivery, in my journey over the past 4 years?
Gosh, now I'd have to go back and think of what I thought of the show back in the day. I think the first episode. I will say, you don't have to put me on the spot. I have not listened to every episode, but I think since I think I started listening or subscribed right about the time that you had Cerrone on. The infamous, oh shit, I better go put a shirt on because you're doing video episode.
I think that's how I started it, right? It was awesome.
Yeah. And so I that was about the time that I subscribed and started listening. And since then I've probably missed a handful. Like I pretty much listened to every episode since then. And I think that nothing really stands out as far as your delivery. I'm sure it's improved. I'm sure if I went back and listened to some of those early, just like you would, you'd be like, oh God, like, all right, I was clunky there. I was rushing to get to the next question there or whatever. But while nothing stands out to me as something that's changed, I'm sure it has. But then of course there's some formatting, the asking those two questions at the end, which wasn't part of the script at the beginning, and being willing to try something, being willing to take a risk, some of the, and nothing really comes to mind, but I know there's been the different, trying a different recording system today and playing with different things, just continuing to test different things out. And sometimes things work. Sometimes as a listener, you have no idea that you tried something different, or that you changed something up. And even as the person that's on the other end of the call with you may not know, but know that you're trying it and you're evolving and trying to push the boundaries a little bit and see what works. And some things do, some things don't. So yeah, I can't, I can't remember specifics from back then because that was 3.5 years ago. And I listened to the Pardo episode, which is the most recent one I think that came out before we're recording this. So it's like those are those newer episodes are fresh in my mind.
No, that's good. I think. I mean, it's just at the end of the day, I think. I appreciate you being a longtime listener. It's like those radio stations, right? You're like first time caller,
long time.
And I think it's we're just always looking for different ways to improve. To your point, and because. Mine is so meta that it's a podcast where I'm talking to other podcasters. I do try to be the crash test dummy, like Pat Flynn likes to say, and just test the new mic out. I have this Shure MB51 that I thought was really cool when I got it. Shout out to Shure, who's also provided the SM7B that I'm speaking into right now. But the MB51, it's a tank, by the way. This is metal. This is great mic, and I'm showing it on the screen for the benefit of the listener, but it's not as convenient when I'm on the road. So now I've been thinking out, like, I've tried to record in my phone, but they make another one that actually plugs straight into the iPhone that you just literally talk into, which is pretty cool. So yeah, just trying these different things because I'm traveling a lot, going to conferences, and it's hard to just maintain that schedule when you're traveling. I think you need to find different ways to do that. But I mean, I appreciate you being a friend and being a fan of the show. Because it's something that means a lot, especially for people like us who've been podcasting for some time.
Oh yeah, and yeah, it really is one of those things you don't necessarily realize, but like I have people that have listened to the show since day one, and I don't take that for granted. But every once in a while, I'm like, oh, this I did a best of episode just the other day, just because the way scheduling works and trying to get people to line up with recording. It was like, well, I didn't have an interview for this show, so let's go back in the archives. It's like, oh, most of you probably haven't listened to this, but the few of you that have been around since day one, this was 265 episodes ago, so you've probably forgotten it. So you might enjoy listening to this one as well. But yeah, I mean, it's easy to get caught up in the numbers game and like, things are growing, that's great. But yeah, everybody has those listeners that have been around since episode 1 or episode 6 or episode 15, and here you are, episode 100, 200, 300, and it's like that means that person has seen you grow, listen to you evolve. It's kind of humbling. Like it really kind of is. Like it's pretty it's pretty awesome, really.
It's been interesting because sometimes I've actually looked on my podcast player I use Overcast, and sometimes I'm in the mood to listen to my friends. It's funny because and people that I know, like Dave Jackson, we've hung out together, and I'm like, oh, I just want to hear like a friendly voice whose face I know, who I've hung out with, who's actually my friend who has a podcast, And so like we all have these friends that we know by face because we've hung out together and we've been friends for a long time. And there's something to be said for wanting to listen to something that a friend made as opposed to someone that you're a fan of, but you've never met the person. So it's just kind of this other person out there, this person, I guess you put on a podcasting pedestal. But I think I like to mix it up sometimes. And it's as we do more of this and as we are in the community more and more, we have more and more friends that are doing shows. And it's nice to have that every once in a while. So as we close close up this episode, you probably know what's coming now. So I'll ask you, what's something you've changed your mind about recently?
Yeah, so I could get really meta here. The podcasters about podcasters, and since I knew this was coming, I've been thinking about it. I probably changed my mind about 3 or 4 times about what my answer was going to be to the question of what have you changed your mind about recently.
That's super meta.
But I'll try to give a real answer, and but before that, I do want to say that I try to change my mind about things a lot, because I feel like the more you're learning and growing and testing new things, trying different things, you should be changing your mind. Or at least hopefully you're learning some things that'll help you change your mind. So I used to kind of be in that, this is how it's going to be mindset. And in the last few years, I've really tried to be more of, well, try it, see what happens. And sometimes your previous suspicion or previous thought is confirmed. And sometimes you're like, well, all right, time to change the mind on that. So for me, most recently, at least I think the most recently that is kind of a substantial change has been the idea of tracking inputs instead of worrying so much about the outputs. And for me, that's played out dietary wise. I've been experimenting with myself on becoming more of a fat adapted runner and kind of going low carb and high fat with my diet. And when I started it, I was just like, I'm not going to get the app. I'm not going to track my macros. Like, that's just way too much of a pain in the ass. It's going to turn me off on the whole idea of what I'm trying to do anyway. And I don't want to have to weigh everything that I eat or measure it all. Like, I just want to eat, but I'm going to shift what I'm eating. And it was going fine after a couple of months. And I just kind of, I wasn't doing it from a weight loss as that being a goal, but I expected that I was going to see a few pounds drop off, and I just wasn't. Like, everything was just staying the same. And so I was curious about if the things that I was eating, if they were having kind of some sneaky carbs in them that I wasn't aware of, and maybe I was having too many carbs for what I was trying to do. So I downloaded an app and started tracking, and it's still not the most joyous thing for me, but it's not as difficult as I thought it was going to be. And I've changed my mind on the value of it, because I was able to see that it wasn't so much that I was having too many carbs, but that because I was eating more fat, like, the calories were still sky high. So, it was good in one sense that the foods I was eating were the ones that I should be eating, but maybe portion control needed to be, mindless snacking. And so that's kind of helped with that too. Is instead of just walking into the kitchen and grabbing a spoonful of peanut butter or grabbing this or grabbing that is low fat, so it's on the diet, but like, those calories don't count because it wasn't a real meal. It wasn't, whatever. By tracking it and being aware. And I think, so often we get caught up on the outputs. We get caught up on how many listeners we have, how many subscribers we have, how fast did I run the race, how, whatever it might be. And it's easy to miss the inputs that, how many tweets did I send out? How many people have I connected with to promote the show to? How many workouts did I run? How well did I sleep last night? What's my diet been like? So tracking the inputs can be tedious, and you can get lost and do too much of that to where it becomes kind of an analysis paralysis situation. But being aware of a little bit more aware of some of that input stuff can really I've changed my mind about it's still kind of a pain in the ass, but it's a good pain in the ass as opposed to being tedium, which is what I thought it was going to be going into it.
Yeah, it's really important to put the work in, because a lot of people complain that they're not getting the benefits or the output. And then, when you ask them, like in marketing, you're like, how many calls did you make? And how many emails did you send out? And how many times did you engage with people on LinkedIn? And how many times did you send a text to a friend or a Facebook message? Just like, a friend of mine has this thing called Partnership Club, and he teaches us the importance of referral networks. But it's like watering a plant, right? And it's like those people that send you a LinkedIn update when they lose their job in corporate world, and like, hey, Denny, we haven't spoken in 3 years, but I just wanted to say hi. And you're like, oh, you just lost your job. Right. So that's really good that you mentioned that. And then the second one, what's the most misunderstood thing about you?
I think that the most misunderstood thing about me is that I am the introvert's introvert. It sounds harsher than it is, but it's somewhat true. Like, I don't like people. I don't like I like being around people in like a one-on-one or a small, a handful of, 3, 4, 5 people. Like, that's cool. But being somewhere where you're a networking function or even going to like, I like going to conferences and things like that, but it's like, it's too much. There's too many, and maybe it's kind of a podcasting problem because this gives me a chance to talk to one person, and there's a screen between us, so it's not scary. But where that gets misunderstood is like people that quote unquote know me in my real life. They listen to the podcast, they're like, who is that guy? Like, where did that, like, just the the personality, the like I said earlier, like putting on my podcast voice. Like I it's not that I'm a different person, but it's a different angle of me that comes out in the show, that comes out in the live streams, that comes out when I'm in my community and engaging with my people. And so I think that there's very few people that know me all the way around. You know, my wife is probably the one that knows me every which way, and she laughs. You know, like my in-laws were here last weekend, and I did my Friday night live stream, and they were like, what is he like? Who is that? Like, what? And because they've never really seen that side of me, like they don't listen to the show or whatever. But it's just like, and she's like, yeah, that's just his podcasting voice. Like that's, you know, that's it just is what it is. So I think that's misunderstood that I'm not as extroverted and bubbly as sometimes I come across on the audio, and you know, it is what it is. I just I need some time away sometimes.
We need that time where we just wind down, and we can't always be on or always be performing. So I appreciate you sharing that. So what's the best place for folks to track you down? And also another plug for the book.
Yeah. So one thing that hasn't changed since the first time we talked is everything is still Diz Runs. So dizruns.com, and all of the social medias, the handle is just DIZRUNS. And, you know, Facebook, like we talked earlier, the Facebook group is Diz Runs Tribe. But yeah, Diz Runs on Instagram, Twitter. Those are definitely my more preferred places where I hang out a bit more. And then the book is Be Ready on Race Day. So bereadyonraceday.com, or on a Amazon location near you, you know, and just search for the book. And like I said, one click that joker, digital and hard copy, paperback. So whatever your preference, it's there. And
if you're listening and you're a runner and you want to have a conversation with Diz Runs, then Denny will be more than happy to have you on the show. As I imagine you're always on the lookout for new guests.
Yeah. Oh, and I guess I should plug the podcast too, right? Diz Runs Radio. So I'm talking to podcasters, people I guess I assume that they know, but whatever podcast app of choice, just, you know, if you just search Diz Runs, it's about the only one that'll pop up. And let me know what you think. And like I said, don't go back and listen to the first 150, although I think they've probably fallen off of most of the feeds. So I don't have to worry about that. Like where you're gonna find is around episode 300 probably on most of the feeds. So they're halfway decent from that point forward, at least.
The latest and the greatest. Well, Denny, thank you for being a longtime friend, a longtime listener, a longtime fellow podcaster. So much shared history, and I can't wait to have you on again. And you know, in the future when we celebrate another milestone, when you hit 1,000, because you're well on your way. You're already past the 500 mark. So it's been so much fun watching your journey, and just having you along for the ride for mine. And so I'm looking forward to a lot of good things for both of us in the future.
Yeah, I appreciate being one of the handful of second timers, and you know, who knows, at some point would love to come back and be in the third time club. But thanks for the time, Harry, and always appreciate having a chance to chat with you.
So thanks again to Denny for that trip down memory lane. It's always nice to catch up with friends, and I love the opportunity of having the podcast as a vehicle for me to do that. Intro and outro music composed by Cedar and Soil. Full show notes for this episode. We always find nuggets of wisdom in our quotes, in our timestamps, in our summaries, and any links mentioned that we talked about. That's all inside the show notes goodness at podcastjunkies.com/169. Stay tuned next week. I've got a great conversation with William Hung. If the name sounds familiar, it's because you are probably an American Idol fan. He is the host of a new podcast about facing your fear, and we connected at Podfest. It was a really surprise to see him there, given I'd watched the first couple of episodes of that show, and it's nice to see him reaching a new audience. So we had an interesting conversation, and he was nice enough to come on the show. So that's 170 next week. As I mentioned at the top of the show, we're putting together a case study of folks interested in a program to help you launch your podcast. So if you're interested, the only thing you have to do is actually send an email to Harry@Podcast Junkies with the word case study in the subject line or in the body, and we'll follow up with details. If you haven't signed up already, our newsletter is available through podcastjunkies.com/8tools, and it's a download of the 8 tools that I've used to launch Podcast Junkies, recently updated with some of the coolest stuff that I've used to help launch the show. So I thought you might enjoy that. podcastjunkies.com/8tools. And if you made it this far, the retention hashtag is RunWithDenny. That's hashtag RunWithDenny. And you can tag Denny at Diz Runs. That's DIZRUNS, and us at podcast_junkies. Thanks for all you do to support the show, and have a fantastic week.